So, what happens when you're sure, like absolutely dead positive, that God led you into something and now it's falling apart? You followed his voice, you took the risk, you stepped out. Maybe you even rearranged your whole life around this call. But now doors are closing, things aren't working, and you're left wondering, wait, did I get it wrong? Or worse, did God change his mind? Well, this episode is for the person who obeyed, only to end up confused and questioning everything. Welcome to the Confident Christian Woman podcast. This is where we tackle questions about things that have been keeping you stuck in unfulfillment, dissatisfaction, or straight up misery. This is where you'll find the help you need to move forward from confusion, fear, or self-doubt into joy, fulfillment, and peace. This is where we become confident Christian women who not only believe, we also obey. So our question today is, what do I do when I thought I followed God's calling, but now everything is falling apart? Let's start by acknowledging something important, which is this. When everything you built around a word from God starts to crumble, it doesn't just shake your plans. It can also shake your confidence in whether or not you truly hear him. It can make you second guess every step you took and wonder if maybe you misunderstood his voice altogether. But I want to offer you a different lens. What if this isn't a failure or a betrayal by God? What if it's a transition, but you're looking at it as everything that you've built unraveling, right? Those are two very different perspectives. Let's talk about what this might look like in real life. You're convinced. Maybe you're even bombarded with how clearly God led you into something. Like it was so clear. You prayed, you waited, you watched for confirmation. And when the doors opened, you knew this is it. This is where I'm meant to be. So you stepped in. Maybe it was a job, a calling, a move, a business, a relationship, a ministry, or a decision that it felt like it came straight from heaven. But no, it's not working. The doors are closing, the situation is unraveling, and you're sitting over here with a question burning a hole in your chest. Why would God lead me here just to let it fall apart? Maybe it was a career path that you felt called to, but now you're being pushed out or redirected and you don't understand why. Maybe it was a relationship that you felt sure God led you into, but now you're hurting and you're unsure if you even heard him correctly. Maybe it was a ministry role or a business venture or some other step of faith, and now it feels like the ground is just falling out from under you. Here's a thought that tends to sneak in a situation like this. If this is a failing, maybe I failed. Maybe I misheard. Maybe I'm not as in tune with God as I thought. First, let's pause right here because this is where a lot of us get stuck. We believe that calling equal clarity, that we know everything, okay? We believe that obedience equals success. Well, the world's version of success anyway. And we believe that when God leads us into something, it's supposed to work out according to our expectations. But here's the truth that many of us were never taught. Just because God called you into something doesn't mean that he called you to stay there forever. Settle with that for a minute. Let that just kind of sink in and settle for a minute. Just because God called you into something doesn't mean that He called you to stay there forever. Sometimes God leads you into something not to settle you there, but to shape you, okay? That place or season wasn't ever supposed to be your final destination. It was supposed to be your next development ground. It was supposed to be a place for you to learn new skills, for growth, for healing, for preparation, for what's still to come, for serving, right? You thought the calling was a destination, but what if it was actually a training ground? What feels like the end of the road might actually be the end of your current assignment, not the end of your calling. Right? That's quite a thought to consider. That's like, think about that. We see this kind of divine pivot in scripture as well. Think about Joseph, classic. Joseph in the Old Testament, right? He had a God-given dream as a teenager. His dream was about leadership and influence. Like, go back and read it if you've forgotten his story, but it was a big dream and it was a powerful one. But the path to that dream went through betrayal, slavery, false accusations, and prison. Can you imagine the dozens of times and points in that journey when Joseph could have said, God, I thought you called me. Why is everything falling apart? But we can look back now and look at Joseph's story and see that nothing was falling apart. Things were unfolding, and not in the way that he thought they would. Certainly not in the way that any of us would have chosen. But it was a path to his vision of leadership and influence, but it was a path that felt like failures and detours, but they were not. They were formation and they were preparation for him, right? What if what feels like a breakdown in your calling is actually a push that is meant to move you into your next assignment? So instead of asking, what do I do when I followed God's calling, but now everything is falling apart? Let's ask some more useful questions, right? These more useful questions will help you to start moving forward again, and they will help you to feel better. So here we go. Have I been treating this calling like a lifelong label instead of a temporary assignment? What if this quote unquote falling apart is actually God repositioning me for what's next? I don't know about you, but when I think about that, when I hear that question, when I really think about that question, I feel excited. Like, I don't feel all discouraged and confused. I feel excited. Here's another question for you. Where might I be holding on to the form of the calling instead of the function of the calling? Right? In what ways have I made this current assignment my identity? Ooh. God's call is consistent, but how it plays out in your life, that can shift across seasons. Let me give you an example. In the previous season of my life, like the one that just went just before this, work-wise, God called me to be a teacher. And I knew that deep down in my bones, like nobody could have told me different. I knew it. He anointed me for it. He prepared me for it. And he walked me right into it. And so for 6 years, I taught. During that entire time, I came to an understanding that I'm so glad I did. I recognized that my calling wasn't to show up in a classroom to deliver lessons to my students. On the surface, that's what it looked like I was doing. But in reality, my calling was to equip them with the skills that they would need to walk through certain doors that wouldn't otherwise be open to them if they didn't have the skills I was teaching them. Okay? Completely different. Very, very much deeper than what looked like what was happening on the surface. Okay? Now, here I am in this current season of my life, and I'm not teaching in a classroom. but I'm still equipping those to whom I'm called with skills that they need to walk through doors they wouldn't otherwise even notice were open, or they wouldn't have the courage or confidence to walk through otherwise. Do you see? Do you see? Plus, in that previous season, God taught me whole new levels of compassion and brought me to whole new levels of discernment of what my students needed from me, which are serving me now in this season. So ask yourself these questions as well. Why am I clinging to the call, to how the calling looked, instead of to what God was using it for? Like, really, ask yourself why. That's not a rhetorical question. Ask yourself why, because there's a reason for it. Underneath, it's probably a fear or an assumption that you didn't realize was at work, okay? So ask yourself that question and answer it. Dig deep and find the answer. Here's another one for you. Why have I been assuming that the way that God used me before is the only way that He can use me? Right? That's such a good question. When you ask yourself these questions, now you put yourself in a position to start thinking, maybe the job wasn't the point. Maybe the impact was the point. Maybe the position or the role changed, but the purpose didn't disappear. Maybe the vehicle was temporary, but the calling was never put on hold or called off. Right? Completely different perspective. Here's a powerful action step that you can take this week. You can write what I'm calling a call timeline. It's a lot of calls, but anyway, a call timeline. Here's how to do it. First, write down everything that you can remember about how God led you into the thing, okay? The confirmation, the moments, the open doors, all of it. Like if I was to write down the things that I remember about how God called me into being a teacher, I would write about stuff that's coming up in my new book that I'm writing now, actually. I would write about being a volunteer in an international organization in another country, how part of my duties was teaching and how I felt drawn to it, how I wanted to be better at it and decided to get training, how I got the certification, how God led me into the certification and confirmed that I was supposed to get the confirm. Like, I would write down all that stuff because there were things that happened, right? The ways in which He confirmed that I should do it, and like how all of that unfolded. How I ended up in the job I got after that, where I spent several years teaching in a classroom, right? I would write down all of that. Second, then I would list, the second thing for you to do, not what I would do, but the second thing for you to do after you've written down everything that you can remember about how God led you into the thing. All right. The second thing for you to do is list out what has changed now. What's closing, what's shifting, and what's no longer working. Okay. And then third, ask yourself these 3 questions. What have I learned? Who have I become? And what skills, insight, or growth did I gain from this season, even if it's ending? This exercise will help you to kind of put things in perspective. And once you have done those 3 steps, then I want you to give it all to God and just to pray and say, Lord, I followed you here. I'm not sure what you're doing next, but I trust you to repurpose this season into the next one. Wow! Doesn't that feel so much better than, where you started out from? All right. Also, to help you to go deeper with God on this, let me give you some prayer prompts that can open up a conversation with Him about it. All right. So here we go. Lord, am I clinging to an old assignment that you're trying to release me from? What do you want me to carry forward from this season? What are you asking me to leave behind as I leave this season? What would it look like if I trusted you with the parts of this story that I don't know yet? And then let God talk to you about the places where your expectations have collapsed and your assumptions turned out to be wrong. Because that's the very reason why you're asking, what do I do when I thought I followed God's calling, but now everything is falling apart? You think it's falling apart because you had certain expectations and assumptions, and it turns out that you were wrong. That is where you will stop piling this extra unnecessary suffering that you're going through. You stop piling it on top of the pain that you're already feeling from the season that's ending. And nobody is saying you shouldn't feel pain from this season that is ending, okay? It's natural for you to feel pain. Oh my goodness. When my time as a classroom teacher was coming to an end, I grieved. I was happy it was ending because I knew something new was beginning, but I was also sad. I was sad and I let myself be sad. And in addition, I'd never before left something that I loved. I'd always left something that I'd been trained and socialized to leave things when they were no longer good, when all the joy had been sucked out of them and they were just, all they were now were draining, right? But this was not draining. I still loved it, but I also knew that God was ending it because he made it very clear. And so I was sad. I felt the pain. I let myself be sad, even as I felt joy in the new thing. And I wept. I cried from what I was leaving behind and who I was leaving behind. So I say all of that to let you know that you don't have to not feel pain. The pain is healthy. The sadness is healthy. The disappointment is healthy. But you do not have to pile on this extra layer of suffering and angst. It's completely unnecessary because you are clinging to expectations and assumptions you made that turned out to be wrong. Let them go. Let them go. All right, let's bring this home. It can shake your confidence when you follow God into something, fully believing that it was forever, only to feel like you're getting the rug pulled out from under you. It doesn't mean that you are wrong, and it doesn't mean that you failed, and it definitely doesn't mean that God has betrayed you or left you hanging. It simply means that you're at a turning point, and the same God who led you into this last thing that you're getting ready to leave, he isn't confused and he's not winging it. Instead, this is an excellent opportunity to reframe how you see your calling, not as a destination, but as a journey, and every part of that journey counts. You may not know what's next, but if God called you, then he has an amazing plan to carry you forward. It's just now for you to stop clinging to what he's asking you to let go of and to release the assumptions that you made and the expectations that you set, and to step forward instead in obedience to the new thing that he wants to do in you. If today's episode stirred something in you, maybe it was hope or clarity or even a little nudge from God, don't forget to download the Clarity Roadmap. It's a free guide designed to give you a quick jump start out of feeling stuck. You can print it, pray through it, or use it as a journaling companion. Remember, you don't have to have all the answers. You only need your one next step. And this free roadmap is a great place to start. To get it, all you need to do is click the link in the show notes.